If I'd known I was going to die in a dim conference room that smelled like cold coffee and betrayal, I would have at least worn heels. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, one of them flickering just enough to make me want to tear it out of the ceiling. The room hadn't changed since the last time I'd been here. Glass walls, a long table with too many chairs, the projector that took 10 minutes to warm up. Even the faint sourness of cheap coffee clung to the air, the kind that sat in the pot long after the meeting ended. I wasn't here for a meeting. I was here for my box of things. One small cardboard box that held what was left of a decade of my life. A framed photo of me and Kate from the agency's first Christmas party, my favorite fountain pen, the little ceramic fox Lucas had made me when he was an intern. I'd come to grab it quietly, unseen, but fate apparently had a flair for cruelty. Through the glass I spotted him, Greg Howell, my ex-fiancé, ex-business partner, and apparently current snake in a tailored suit. He was leaning back in a chair at the head of the table, his smile as polished as the Rolex on his wrist. Across from him sat a man I didn't recognize, expensive watch, newer suit. Investor type. I froze in the doorway, just far enough not to be noticed. She never saw it coming, Greg was saying, voice smooth, almost bored. Vera was brilliant, sure, but she trusted too easily. That's the thing about smart women. They think they're smart about people, too. She signed the papers without reading the fine print, handed me the company on a silver platter. My fingers tightened around the box until the cardboard edges bit into my palms. The investor chuckled. "You don't feel bad about it?" Greg smirked. "She got a payout. More than she deserved, honestly. Besides, she would have run the place into the ground. I saved it. I saved us. Saved us. I had been us." Heat surged in my chest, anger, humiliation, grief all tangled into something sharp. I should have walked away. I should have kept my head down, taken my box and left him to rot in his own ego. Instead, I took a step forward. "Wow," I said, my voice steady in a way my pulse wasn't. "And here I thought we broke up because you were cheating. Turns out you were also auditioning for a corporate sociopath of the year." Greg's smile faltered for half a second before sliding back into place. "Vera, didn't see you there, clearly. You were too busy rewriting history." The investor shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Greg leaned forward. "This isn't the place." "No, you're right," I snapped. "The place was 3 years ago, when I should have read that fine print you were so proud of." My pulse thundered. The edges of my vision blurred, and the tightness in my chest turned into something solid, suffocating. I pressed a hand against my sternum, but the pain didn't ease. It spiked, white-hot, radiating down my arm. "Not now, not here." Greg's voice sounded far away. "Vera?" The investor stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I gasped for air, but it wouldn't come. My knees buckled, and the box slipped from my grip, spilling its contents across the carpet. Kate's photo, my pen, the ceramic fox. The last thing I saw was the ceiling's chandelier, gaudy, too big for the room, its glass pieces warping and twisting like a funhouse mirror. Greg's reflection in the shards looked wrong, stretched, like a snake uncoiling. And then, nothing. Not the endless dark I'd expected. Instead, the smell of fresh coffee, rich and sharp, the soft whir of a printer, the clack of a keyboard 2 desks over. I opened my eyes. My desk, my old desk. The monitor hummed faintly, the same outdated interface I hadn't seen in years. My gaze darted to the wall, the calendar, the date. Weeks before I signed the deal that handed Greg the company. I grabbed the edge of the desk, my hands trembling. My reflection in the darkened monitor stared back. Fewer lines, smoother skin, the version of me from 8 years ago. 30-year-old me. Alive. And this time, I wasn't going to let him win. The sunlight slanted across my desk in the way I'd forgotten. Warm, unhurried, catching on the dust motes in the air. My desk, my old desk. The monitor in front of me hummed quietly, displaying an interface so outdated it looked like something from a museum exhibit. Pre-rebrand company colors, a blocky logo in the corner. To my right sat a neat stack of business cards, my name printed in bold serif, the title co-creative director, my favorite ceramic mug, the one with a hairline crack running down the side, held fresh coffee that actually smelled decent. I reached for my phone. The lock screen lit up, an older model, heavier in my palm, with a faint scratch across the glass I remembered cursing about. The date glared back at me. My heart pounded. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a near-death hallucination. I was back. For a long moment, all I could hear was the thud of my pulse in my ears. Then the panic hit sharp, breath-stealing. My chest felt too tight, my skin too hot. Oh God, what if I messed it up again? What if the universe was just setting me up for a sequel to the same disaster? I closed my eyes, counted to 5, and inhaled slowly. The panic ebbed just enough for something colder, steadier to take its place. Think, Vera, strategize. This isn't the moment to scream or run around telling people you died and came back. No one would believe you. They'd send you to HR, then to a psychiatrist. I'd been given a gift, or a trap, or maybe both. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going to waste it. I mentally flipped through the timeline of my first life, pinpointing the key mistakes like flashing hazard signs, trusting Greg implicitly, signing paperwork without double-checking, letting him handle investor relations alone, the small betrayals until they piled into one final blow. This time, I would watch, I would listen, and I'd cut the wire before the bomb went off. My eyes drifted to my computer screen. The corporate email client blinked with unread messages. I moved the mouse, typed in my password, only to be met with the flat, cold, incorrect password box. Right, of course. I changed my passwords obsessively back then. 6 months, like clockwork, and never the same twice. I frowned, tapping the desk. Okay, what was my spring password in year X? The cat's name plus my old zip code? No, that was for Netflix. Maybe the book character plus birth year? Wrong again. I muttered under my breath, who the hell did I think was going to hack me in 2015? After 5 failed attempts and 1 close call with the account lockout warning, it finally clicked. The password slid in, and my inbox opened with a cheerful little chime. Victory, I whispered. And only 20 minutes of my second life wasted. A voice behind me made me jump. Talking to yourself already? Rough morning? I turned, and there she was, Kate Freeman. Her red hair was pulled into its usual messy bun, a pencil tucked behind her ear, eyes bright with amusement. She held a thick stack of invoices against her chest like armor. Kate, I breathed. Before I could stop myself, she raised an eyebrow. Last I checked, that's still my name. She tilted her head. You look like you've seen a ghost. If only she knew. In my last life, Kate had been more than my colleague. She'd been my anchor on the bad days, the one who slipped chocolate onto my desk before big pitches, who rolled her eyes with me when Greg got self-important. And she'd been one of the casualties of his cost-cutting after the takeover. Now she stood here alive and unburned by the fallout. I forced a smile, just weird déjà vu, you know how it is. Kate narrowed her eyes, then shrugged. Well, if déjà vu pays the invoices on time, I'm all for it. She plunked the stack down on my desk. By the way, Greg's in one of his moods. Tread lightly. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. Oh, I'll tread lightly, all right. Right up until I crush him. Thanks for the heads up, I said lightly. Kate smirked. Don't mention it, literally. Don't mention me if you get caught in the blast radius. She walked off, leaving the faint scent of her citrus shampoo in the air. I watched her go, my chest tight. Not with panic this time, but with determination. I'd been given a second chance. And the clock was already ticking. The main floor of the agency was just as I remembered it. Open plan, glass partitions catching the morning light. Sleek furniture that looked expensive but made your back ache after an hour. The air carried the twin scents of fresh ground coffee and the expensive, vaguely floral perfume worn by Greg's assistant, Monica. I could almost hear the ghost of my past self sighing in relief to be back here, still blind to the traps around her. Not this time. I made my way toward my corner workstation, aware of eyes following me. People were always watching here, not out of malice necessarily, but because in an office like this, information was currency. Who was talking to whom, who looked stressed, who got called into Greg's office unexpectedly. And speaking of, his door stood open. Greg Howell sat behind his pristine glass desk, flipping through a folder as if the fate of the free world depended on it. He glanced up when I passed, his smile hitting me like a flashbulb, bright, practiced, and utterly hollow. "Vera," he drawled, leaning back in his chair. "You're in early. What's the occasion? Did you finally decide to take my advice and get a head start?" In my old life I might have bristled. This time, I tilted my head and smiled like I didn't notice the jab. Just thought I'd get a jump on a few things. Greg's eyes narrowed a fraction, like he was testing for cracks. "Good. We've got a lot riding on the next few weeks." Oh, I knew. I knew exactly what we had riding, and how he planned to make sure I fell off the horse so he could ride away with the prize. I kept my tone light. "Wouldn't dream of letting you down." His lips curved in something that might have passed for approval, but I caught the flicker of calculation in his gaze before he looked back at his papers. "That's what I like to hear." I moved on, filing away every detail. His desk phone had 3 new message slips under it. Monica's neat handwriting, one had a red underline. Important. At my desk, I slid into my chair and began scanning my inbox. That's when I noticed the first thread. An email from a client, addressed to both Greg and me, but the copy to me was missing a key attachment. The attachment Greg had, based on the subject line, probably already forwarded to someone else. Last time, I'd brushed it off as an oversight. Now I saw it for what it was, a pattern. Information control. The next clue came 15 minutes later, when Monica drifted past my desk to refill her coffee, phone in hand. I caught the tail end of a whisper. "No, he'll never know it came from us." She froze when she realized I was watching, then smiled too quickly. "Morning," she chirped, and disappeared into the break room. I sipped my own coffee and let my expression stay pleasantly neutral, the perfect picture of obliviousness. Let them think I was still that Vera, the one who trusted people to play fair. For now. A shadow fell across my desk. "Hey, hi, you're Vera, right?" I looked up to see a tall, slim guy with dark hair that had clearly lost a battle with the wind. He clutched a portfolio to his chest like it might run away. "Yes," I said, softening my voice. "And you are?" "Lucas, I'm the new junior designer, started last week." He shifted awkwardly. "Greg said I should come to you if I had questions about the March campaign, Lucas." My chest tightened. In my last life he'd been a bright spark, original ideas, bold concepts, and Greg had snuffed him out under the guise of constructive criticism until Lucas left the industry altogether. I'd watched it happen and told myself it wasn't my fight. Not this time. "Of course," I said warmly. "Pull up a chair, let's take a look." His shoulders relaxed just a fraction as he sat. We went over the layouts, his designs surprisingly strong for someone fresh out of school. I could already see where Greg might poke holes, not because the work was bad, but because it wasn't his style. "You're good," I said honestly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And if you get feedback, filter it. Some of it's about making the work better. Some of it's about other things." Lucas frowned. "Other things? You'll figure it out." I smiled, but it felt like baring my teeth. As Lucas left, I glanced at Greg's office. He was on the phone, voice low, expression smug. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I'd walked into the lion's den with my eyes wide open. And this time, I wasn't a prey. The coffee shop on the ground floor of the next building was a world away from the glass and steel chill of our office. The air was warm, sweet with vanilla latte and cinnamon, the low hum of conversation blending with the soft hiss of the espresso machine. Morning light poured through the wide windows, catching in the steam rising from mugs. I slid into my usual spot by the window, a place I'd chosen in my last life for its relative quiet, and for the fact that no one from our agency ever seemed to come here. That morning, the quiet was exactly what I needed, or so I thought. Lansing. The voice was male, deep and edged with dry amusement. I looked up to see a man in a navy suit standing beside my table, one eyebrow raised. His hair was dark and just a little too perfect, his tie knotted with the kind of precision that screamed expensive habits. I knew that face. Ithan Marlowe. Director of Marlowe and Company, the agency we'd both pretended wasn't our fiercest competition. In my last life, I'd avoided him, partly because I thought he was arrogant, partly because Greg had always called him the vulture. In person, the word didn't quite fit. A vulture didn't have eyes that sharp or posture that self-assured. You look, he tilted his head pretending to search for the word. Like someone just told you the coffee here is decaf. I smirked despite myself. And you look like someone who judges people by their beverage choices. Only if they're terrible choices, he said easily, sliding into the seat opposite me without asking. You were staring out the window like you'd lost something. Or someone. Or maybe, I countered. I was thinking about work, like a responsible adult. He gave me a look that suggested he didn't buy it for a second. And here I thought Lansing and Howell was too busy polishing its own halo to brood over coffee. I ignored the little sting that came with hearing Greg's name attached to mine. Maybe I'm in the market for a different kind of partnership. That got his attention. The faint smirk didn't disappear, but his gaze sharpened. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? I asked, leaning back in my chair. We both know Greg's going after the Trellis Media account, and we both know you're in the running too. I also know something you probably don't. He's going to try to steal part of your pitch and fold it into his. His expression didn't change much, but I caught the subtle shift, a flicker of annoyance, quickly masked. And you're telling me this because I want him to lose. I let the words hang in the air between us, watching him weigh them. And because if you and I combine resources, your reach, my inside knowledge, we can make sure he does. He studied me for a long moment, like he was deciding whether I was offering him a winning lottery ticket or a lit stick of dynamite. In my experience, people who come to me with sudden offers usually have more to gain than they're admitting. Of course I do, I said lightly. And so do you. The difference is, I'm telling you up front. That earned me a quiet huff of laughter. You've got nerve. I'll give you that. I shrugged. Nerve is cheaper than billboards. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Fine. I'm interested. But I have conditions. No half-truths, no convenient omissions. Full transparency on everything we share. And deadlines, tight ones. I don't care if you're working at midnight. If I say I need it, I need it. Sounds almost like you expect me to fail. I expect everyone to fail, he said matter-of-factly. Keeps me from being disappointed. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Then maybe I'll surprise you. He gave me a small nod, as if we'd just shaken on something more dangerous than a business arrangement. We'll see. I'll have my assistant send you the framework by end of day. Welcome to the partnership, Lansing. As he stood to leave, I watched him go, confident, purposeful, a man who didn't waste steps. In my past life, I thought working with him would be like trying to ride a storm. Now, I realized maybe that was exactly what I needed. And if Greg thought I was still playing by the same old rules, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The conference room was quiet at this hour, the rest of the office already emptying out. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched in a patchwork of lights, golden squares and apartment buildings, the slow blink of a radio tower in the distance. Inside, the only light came from the warm glow of the table lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the polished surface of the meeting table. Kate sat opposite me, legs crossed, flipping through a spreadsheet she'd brought in on her tablet. Her bun was coming loose, a few strands of red hair falling forward, as she frowned at the numbers. So, she said finally, are you going to tell me why we're here after hours? Or is this some kind of hostage situation? I smiled faintly. What if I told you I want to start something new? With you? Her brows shot up. I like the with me part, the rest sounds like trouble. It is, I admitted, leaning forward, my elbows on the table. Trouble for Greg. That got her attention. She set the tablet down. Go on. I laid it out carefully, no talk of reincarnation obviously, but enough truth to make it clear I had a plan. A side project. One that could, in time, stand on its own. One that needed someone I could trust absolutely. I want you as my co-founder, I said. When the time's right, we make it official. Until then, we build quietly. Network. Secure clients. Keep it off Greg's radar. Kate stared at me for a moment, then laughed softly. You really are serious. I've never been more serious. She tapped her fingers against the table. You know, in every crime movie, this is the part where the sidekick says, I'm in. She leaned back with a smirk. So, I'm in. But I want 50%. 49, I countered instantly. I need the tiebreaker vote. She grinned. Fine. 49. And I get to name the coffee machine. Deal. We shook on it. The moment strangely grounding. For the first time in years, well, years for me, hours for her, I felt like I had an ally I could count on. The door swung open before I could say more, and Lucas stumbled in, clutching a sketch pad and looking like he'd just been through a storm. Sorry, I didn't know. He stopped when he saw me. Actually, can I talk to you? Kate gave me a quick, curious glance, then excused herself with a wink, slipping out into the hallway. Lucas shut the door behind her, his jaw tight. Greg just tore into me in front of half the team, said my mock-ups were amateur hour and that I should stick to safe ideas. I kept my face neutral, though my stomach tightened. I knew this play, Greg's first step in wearing someone down. Let me see, I said. He handed me the pad. The designs were good, better than good. Bold colors, strong lines, and a concept that actually made the product stand out instead of drowning in trends. Risky, yes, but brilliant. Lucas, I said, closing the pad, there's nothing wrong with this work. He gave a short, bitter laugh. Yeah, well, he thinks there is. I shook my head. Listen to me. Greg's criticism isn't about making you better. It's about making you smaller. Don't give him that. He blinked at me clearly, not expecting that kind of bluntness. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen talent like yours get crushed here. I'm not letting that happen to you. I handed back the pad. Keep pushing, and if you ever need backup in a meeting, I'm right there. For a second he just stood there, holding the pad like it weighed more than it should. Then he nodded slowly. Thanks, Vera, that means a lot. Good. Now go home before you start thinking I'm secretly nice. A small smile flickered across his face before he left, closing the door quietly behind him. I sat back in my chair, looking out at the city lights again. Kate, Lucas. Pieces of a team I hadn't had the first time around. Pieces Greg wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The foundation was set. Now all I had to do was build. The Monday morning meeting was already in full swing by the time I walked into the main conference room. The place was packed. Designers, account managers, junior staff, all crammed around the long table, or lining the walls with coffee cups in hand. The projector hummed at the front, casting a bright rectangle onto the screen where Greg was in the middle of his usual self-congratulatory opener. I took my seat halfway down the table, feeling the usual mix of caffeine and tension in the air. Across the room I caught a glimpse of Ithan Marlowe, here as a guest consultant for the Trellis media pitch. He was leaning casually in his chair, pen in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Greg clicked to the next slide. Now, moving on to campaign concepts for Trellis, he said, scanning the room before settling his gaze on me. Vera, you had something you wanted to share? The way he said it, just enough of a pause before something, wasn't lost on anyone. I knew this tactic. Frame me as unprepared before I even opened my mouth. I stood, remote in hand, and clicked to my first slide. I do, I said evenly. A multi-platform campaign focusing on Trellis's sustainability mission, tying it directly to consumer identity. We lead with a bold visual hook, green cityscapes overlaid with their product line then. Greg cut in, shaking his head with an exaggerated sigh. Vera, we've talked about this. You can't just throw around words like bold and identity and hope it sells. Clients need safe, reliable. You're overcomplicating things. The room went quiet. I felt 20 pairs of eyes flick between us, waiting for me to back down. In my first life I would have. I would have swallowed my pride, mumbled something about revising. Not this time. I smiled sweetly. You're right, Greg. I'll make sure the campaign is as safe and reliable as an ad for beige socks. A few muffled laughs broke the tension. Even Ithan, who'd been pretending to take notes, looked up with a faint smirk tugging at his mouth. Greg's jaw tightened, but he recovered quickly. Well, we'll keep that in mind. Moving on. I clicked through the rest of my slides with calm precision, outlining the strategy, the cross-platform tie-ins, the metrics to measure impact. By the time I finished, even some of the junior staff were nodding along. When Greg wrapped the meeting 15 minutes later, people filed out in the usual slow trickle. I gathered my notes, aware of someone approaching from my right. You enjoy poking the bear, don't you? I looked up to find Ithan standing beside me, his expression equal parts amused and intrigued. Only when the bear's asking for it, I said, sliding my pen into my folder. He tilted his head slightly, studying me in that way of his, like he was cataloging a new species. I thought you'd roll over. Greg has that effect on people, not on me, I said simply. A slow smile curved his mouth. Noted. He walked off without another word, leaving me with a distinct impression that, for the first time, he'd stopped underestimating me. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I wanted. The office felt different at night. Without the daytime buzz of ringing phones and hurried footsteps, it was almost peaceful. Soft pools of light over workstations, the faint hum of the HVAC, and the quiet strains of jazz coming from a speaker somewhere near the back. Ithan's agency had a more lived-in feel than ours. His designers' desks were scattered with sketches, color swatches, and half-empty mugs. A faint aroma of espresso clung to the air. I sat at a long table with my laptop, slides for the trellis pitch open, while Ithan stood at the other end, sifting through a stack of mock-ups. You know, he said without looking up, if you keep rearranging that slide for the next half hour, it's still going to be slide 4. It's not about rearranging, I said, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. It's about the psychological flow. If we open with the sustainability stats too early, they'll tune out before we get to the emotional hook. He glanced at me over the top of the mock-ups. Psychological flow, emotional hooks. Did you take a marketing class or a psychology one? Both, I said sweetly. You're welcome. He smirked and went back to his papers. For the next 20 minutes, we worked in companionable silence, broken only by the occasional sip of coffee or the rustle of paper. Around 10, a young designer named Maya, sharp bob, oversized sweater, came over to drop off revised layouts. Hey, she said, setting them down, remember, the client's going to push back on the green cityscape concept. They'll say it's too urban for their suburban target. The words hit me like a switch flipping in my head. I'd heard that exact sentence before. Same cadence, same slightly apologetic tone. In my first life, it had been said in the final review meeting, by someone on Greg's team. We'd ignored it, figuring Trellis would come around. They hadn't. Greg had used the rejection as leverage to sell his safer, blander concept. Not this time. I forced myself to keep my expression neutral. Thanks for the heads up, I told Maya. We'll adjust. She smiled and headed out, leaving me with my thoughts buzzing. Ithan looked up from his mock-ups. Adjust? You seemed pretty married to the green cityscape 5 minutes ago. Still am, I said, but maybe it needs a prenup, just in case. He raised an eyebrow. Translation? Translation, I'm building in a parallel concept. If Trellis freaks out about the urban angle, we pivot without losing momentum. No scrambling, no giving them an opening to hand the whole thing to someone else. Ithan studied me for a moment, then set the mock-ups down and walked over. That's a smart move. I have my moments, I said lightly. But my pulse was still quick from the déjà vu. He leaned against the table, crossing his arms. Most people in this business dig in when they believe in something. You're already thinking 3 moves ahead. Why? I met his gaze, choosing my words carefully. Because I've learned the hard way that being right isn't enough. You have to be ready for the people who want you to be wrong. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition maybe. But he didn't press. Instead, he reached for my coffee mug and took a sip without asking. I blinked at him. "You have your own cup. Yours had more sugar," he said, unbothered, setting it back down. I shook my head, but there was a ghost of a smile on my lips as I turned back to my laptop. We worked another hour, side by side, refining slides, tightening copy, swapping ideas like we'd been doing it for years instead of days. The city outside was a dark canvas splashed with neon and headlights. For the first time in this second life, I felt a sharp, almost dangerous sense of momentum. I was steering the ship, and this time I knew where the icebergs were. It happened on a Thursday morning, just like before. Same client, same setup, same smug little trap. In my first life, I hadn't even realized what Greg had done until days later, when the fallout hit. Now, I could practically see the strings he was pulling before he even tugged them. We were scheduled to meet the trellis team for a final pre-pitch alignment. Greg had insisted on handling the prep himself so nothing gets lost in translation so he could accidentally leave a key file behind, throw me under the bus, and position himself as the one to save the day. I let him. Or rather, I let him think I was letting him. The night before, I made my own copy of the file, a market analysis report Trellis considered essential to the pitch. I loaded it onto my tablet, triple-checked it, and sent a backup to a private email account. So when we walked into the conference room at Trellis headquarters, sleek glass walls, minimalist furniture, bowls of perfect green apples on the sideboard, I was ready. Greg started strong, charming smiles, perfect pacing. He clicked through the slides, and when the moment came for the market analysis, "Oh," he said, patting his leather portfolio with exaggerated confusion, "that's strange. I must have left the updated report back at the office." "Vera, did you?" I met his gaze, letting just the right amount of hesitation flicker across my face. "I don't have it with me," I said, then added, "but I do have my tablet." I reached into my bag and slid it onto the table. The file opened instantly, crisp and ready, Trellis's own logo at the top. Greg's smile didn't crack, but the faint muscle twitch near his jaw was all the confirmation I needed. "We can pick up right where we left off," I said smoothly, passing the tablet to the Trellis marketing director. The rest of the meeting shifted in my favor. The Trellis team asked me the follow-up questions, looked to me for clarification, and when Greg tried to interject, it came off as awkward rather than authoritative. By the end, the marketing director smiled at me like we were already partners. "This was exactly what we needed," she said. "We'll be in touch about finalizing the agreement." When we stepped out into the hallway, Greg's tone was tight. "You could have told me you brought it, and ruin your dramatic pause," I said lightly. "Didn't seem fair." His eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever. I think I'm prepared," I corrected, and walked past him toward the elevators. "That was..." He tilted his head, searching for the word. "Impressive." I shrugged. "It was basic damage control." "Don't undersell it," he said, his tone sharpening just a fraction. "I've seen Greg pull that stunt before. Most people crumble. You didn't even flinch." I glanced at him, the late morning sunlight catching in his eyes. "Flinching wastes time." He smiled faintly, but it wasn't mocking, it was almost approving. "You play a longer game than I thought. Maybe you just weren't paying attention," I said. "Oh, I'm paying attention now," he replied, and there was something in his voice that made me think he wasn't just talking about work. We reached the corner where our paths split, his office one way, mine the other. He gave me a small nod, like we'd just shared a secret, then turned away. For a moment, I stood there feeling the satisfaction hum low in my chest. In my first life, Greg had blindsided me here. In this one, I'd sidestepped the blow entirely, and taken a piece of the win for myself. And I wasn't done yet. The bar was dim and warm, the kind of place where conversations stayed low, and the lighting made everyone look a little softer around the edges. A jazz trio played quietly in the corner, the muted trumpet weaving through the soft clink of glasses. I sat across from Ithan in a booth near the back, a glass of red wine in my hand. He'd ordered bourbon, neat. Outside the city was still humming, but in here time felt slower. "I don't usually do this," he said, rolling the glass between his palms. "What drink?" I asked. "Drink with competitors," he corrected, one eyebrow lifting. I smirked. "Guess that makes this a business expense then." He chuckled quietly, then took a sip. You know, I used to have a partner. Not in the romantic sense. Business. We started Marlowe and Company together, spent 5 years building it from nothing. I leaned back, listening. There was a different edge to his voice now. Less polished, more real. He was the numbers guy, I was the creative. We balanced each other out, or at least I thought we did. He set his glass down, the sound dull against the wood. Turns out he'd been siphoning clients for months, setting up his own firm behind my back. The day I found out, half our accounts walked out the door with him. I frowned. What did you do? He shrugged, but it was a tight gesture. Rebuilt. Took years. I was lucky, some of my people stayed. But I stopped believing in partnerships after that. Too much risk in trusting the wrong person. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. Sounds familiar, I said quietly. He studied me for a moment, like he was weighing whether to ask, but he didn't. Instead, he said, which is why I'm still trying to figure out what your angle is with me. Maybe I'm just tired of losing to the wrong people, I said. And maybe I think you're not one of them. For a second, neither of us spoke. The music from the corner filled the silence, the low hum of a bass line threading between us. Something shifted in his expression, less guarded, more curious. Careful, he said softly. That almost sounded like a compliment. I smiled faintly. Don't get used to it. We both took a drink, eyes holding just a moment too long before looking away. There was an ease to the conversation after that. We traded small jabs about work habits, his meticulous file naming, my tendency to sketch ideas on napkins. He told me about the time a high-profile client's dog destroyed a mock-up worth thousands. I told him about the charity event where Greg had tripped over a floral arrangement and blamed me for not warning him. The laughter was quiet but real, and somewhere in the middle of it I realized I wasn't thinking about Greg, or the pitch, or the next move. I was just here, in this moment, with someone who understood the sharp edges of betrayal and the long climb back up. A spark flickered, quick, unexpected, but I felt it. Judging by the way his gaze lingered on me for half a second too long, I wasn't the only one. We didn't acknowledge it. Neither of us was ready to. When we finally left, the night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. We walked together to the corner where our paths split. "Good night, Lansing," he said, his tone lighter than it had been all evening. "Good night, Marlowe." He turned and walked away. And I stood there for a moment longer, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, wondering when exactly my neat little plan had started to get complicated. The official agreement came together over a single page of paper and 2 signatures. No lawyers, no drawn-out negotiations. Just me and Ithan sitting across from each other at his office table, pens in hand, the air sharp with the scent of fresh coffee and the faint tang of risk. "You're sure?" he asked, one brow raised. "Positive," I said, signing my name with a flourish. "I'd rather take a calculated gamble with you than a slow death with Greg. That's one way to flatter a business partner," he murmured, adding his signature beneath mine. And just like that, we were in. From that moment, the pace shifted. We stopped dancing around each other's ideas and started building them, merging his reach with my inside knowledge. The trellis pitch became our joint battlefield. My strategy and his polish, my read on Greg's habits, and his team's flawless execution. Meanwhile, the cracks in Greg's armor started showing. By the second week, word spread that 2 of his smaller investors were reconsidering their position. The official reason was vague: market confidence, portfolio realignment, but I knew better. Trellis had a reputation in the industry, and their interest in working with me and Ithan wasn't exactly subtle. Investors could smell which way the wind was blowing. Greg noticed too. The sharpness in his voice during meetings had shifted from calculated to reactive. He started calling me into his office more often, fishing for information I had no intention of giving. I played my part, polite, smiling, unhelpful. Back at my own desk, Kate was thriving. With the side project we'd quietly started, she'd already secured 2 small clients under the radar. She handled their accounts with the same ruthless efficiency she'd once used to keep Greg's chaos in check. 2 more like these, she told me one afternoon. And we'll have enough cash flow to file paperwork. I grinned. Then let's find 2 more. Lucas was making his own waves. I'd pushed for him to take lead on a minor pitch Greg didn't care about, knowing it would be a safe proving ground. He'd walked into the client meeting looking like he might faint, but walked out with a signed contract and a check. When he came by my desk afterward, his face was still lit up. They actually liked my concept, like really liked it. I told you they would, I said. Yeah, but no one's ever let me run with my own work before. Get used to it, I told him, and meant it. By the end of the month, the balance of power was tilting. Greg was scrambling to hold on to his image, while our pitch deck for Trellis was looking better than anything I'd worked on in years. Late one evening, Ithan and I stood in the middle of his office, the table covered with mock-ups, data sheets, and coffee cups. He studied the final slide on the big screen, arms crossed. This, he said finally, is going to win. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. Yes, it is. For a moment the silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, just charged. Then he cleared his throat. We present in 2 weeks. Until then, don't give Greg anything he can use. Don't worry, I said, gathering my notes. He's not getting anything from me, except a view of my back as we walk out with his client. Greg had started this game years ago, but now, the board was mine. The Trellis boardroom was all sharp lines and quiet money, long glass table, high-backed chairs, a panoramic view of the city skyline. Morning light poured in through the windows, but the air was heavy with expectation. I sat near the end of the table with my notes neatly stacked, the final pitch deck on the screen ready to go. Ithan stood beside me, calm and unreadable, like a man playing chess 5 moves ahead. Across the table, Greg was doing his usual pre-presentation performance. Smooth smiles, casual charm, handshakes that lingered just long enough to feel personal. It would have been convincing if I hadn't known exactly what he was about to try. In my first life, this had been the moment he stole my idea, slid it into the pitch at the last second, passing it off as his own, leaving me scrambling. But I'd come prepared. The sustainability hook in our campaign was a calculated risk, a bold integration of Trellis's eco-initiative into every customer touchpoint. In my first life, Greg had taken that idea and watered it down into something safe and forgettable. This time, I'd made sure there was a digital trapdoor built in. I'd slipped a unique non-public data point into the mock-up, something that only existed in my version of the file. If Greg tried to present it without me, it would be obvious where it came from. The meeting began. Trellis's marketing director, a sharp-eyed woman named Clarissa, nodded for us to start. Greg moved first, taking the floor with the ease of someone who thought he was in control. Before we begin, he said smoothly, I'd like to share a concept we've been developing that I think you'll find aligns perfectly with your brand's vision. He clicked his remote, and my slides appeared on the screen. My exact slides. He launched into the pitch like it was his own work, until he hit the trap. And as you'll see here, he said, pointing to a graph, consumer engagement has... He stopped mid-sentence, his brow furrowed just for a heartbeat, as he registered the footnote at the bottom of the slide, data provided by Lansing Strategy Group. Clarissa leaned forward. Lansing Strategy Group? I wasn't aware you were collaborating with them. Greg froze. It was subtle, half a second, but it was enough. I leaned in, my voice perfectly even. That's because you weren't. This particular analysis is proprietary. We developed it specifically for Trellis as part of our joint pitch with Marlowe and Company. The room went quiet, the weight of the words settling in. Greg's smile tightened, but I didn't give him a chance to recover. If you'll allow us, I continued smoothly, standing to join Ithan at the front. We'll walk you through the complete campaign we've built. One that's ready to launch immediately, without the risk of legal or brand complications. From there, it was ours. Ithan picked up seamlessly, outlining the creative vision with a kind of confidence that made people want to follow him. I handled the strategy, answering Clarissa's questions with data points and case studies that left no room for doubt. Every slide was polished, every transition deliberate. Greg sat back, silent, the picture of someone trying not to grind his teeth in public. When we reached the final slide, Clarissa exchanged a glance with the CFO beside her. Well, she said, I think that makes our decision straightforward. She extended her hand to Ithan, then to me. We'll be moving forward with Marlowe and Company, in partnership with Lansing Strategy Group. I felt the hum of victory in my chest. We look forward to it, I said, shaking her hand firmly. Outside the building, the air felt brighter, sharper. Ithan and I stood on the steps for a moment, the noise of the city just a faint backdrop. That, he said, was surgical. You set the trap, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. And you didn't even blink when it closed. I met his gaze. I told you I play the long game. His smile was slow, deliberate. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Good plan, I said, and we started down the steps together. Greg had stolen my company once. In this life, I'd stolen his win before he even knew it was gone. 3 months later, the name Lansing and Marlowe was printed in clean black serif on the glass door of our new office. It was smaller than either of our old spaces, but it smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, bouncing off the brushed steel desks and the single green plant Kate swore she wouldn't kill this time. She stood at the reception counter, going through invoices with the same precision she'd once used to run damage control for Greg. We've got 2 new inquiries this week, she called out. Both from referrals. You're welcome. Remind me to get you a crown, I said, walking past with a fresh cup of coffee. You already gave me 50%, she shot back without looking up. That's better than a crown. Ithan emerged from his office, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, carrying a stack of mock-ups under one arm. We're locking down the trellis launch schedule today, he said, dropping the stack onto my desk. And Clarissa's already hinted at a second campaign. Kate grinned. That's what happens when you don't screw over your partners. Or your clients, I added, and the 3 of us exchanged a look that said exactly who we were thinking about. Greg had taken the trellis loss hard. The whispers about his oversight during the presentation had spread, and within weeks, 2 more major clients left. Investors pulled out. His name wasn't on any shortlist that mattered anymore. I hadn't seen him since the pitch. I didn't need to. Some endings didn't require a front row seat. By late afternoon, Kate had left for a meeting, and the office was unusually quiet. I was sorting through project notes when Ithan leaned in my doorway. You know, he said, this whole partnership thing is going better than I expected. Profitable, productive. His mouth curved into that slow, deliberate smile I was starting to recognize as dangerous. And stable. Stable's good, I said cautiously. Stable's great, he agreed. Then, with a perfectly straight face, so I guess it's only logical I should marry you. For the sake of the business, of course. I blinked, then laughed. Wow. You really know how to sweep a girl off her feet. Romance, tax benefits, and a shared filing cabinet. Don't forget the coffee machine, he said, stepping into the office. Kate would insist it comes with us. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. You're ridiculous. Maybe, he said, leaning one hand on my desk, but admit it, you didn't say no. I met his gaze, letting the silence stretch just long enough to feel like a challenge. If this is your idea of a proposal, Marlowe, you're going to have to do better. His eyes glinted. Good. I like a long game. We ended the day going over the trellis rollout one last time, the easy rhythm between us as natural as breathing. The sun dipped low, painting the office in warm gold, and for the first time in years, maybe in either life, I felt something that had nothing to do with revenge or survival. It felt like building, like moving forward. And as I locked up that night, I knew Greg had been right about one thing back in my old life. Partnerships could make or break you. He'd just been wrong about who I should choose.